In the 1st century AD, during the time when Roman authority governed the lands of Judea and Galilee, teachers often used stories to reveal deeper truths about life and faith. Villages were filled with travelers, farmers, merchants, and fishermen who lived under the watchful eyes of both religious leaders and imperial power. In that world of expectation and uncertainty, a teacher named Jesus spoke of the future, of justice, and of a moment when every human life would be measured not by wealth or status, but by compassion. The setting for this teaching was likely along the dusty roads between villages or in the open spaces where crowds often gathered to listen. The land was dry and sunlit, with olive groves stretching across the hills and stone paths winding through small settlements. Houses were built of rough limestone, with wooden beams supporting flat roofs of packed clay. The air carried the scent of earth and grain. People stood close together in the warm afternoon light, their robes stirring slightly in the breeze. Donkeys waited nearby, and clay water jars rested beside shaded walls. At the center of the gathering stood Jesus. He wore the simple garments common to a Jewish teacher of the time, a long tunic woven from undyed wool, tied at the waist with a cloth belt, and a mantle draped across his shoulders to protect from sun and wind. His sandals were worn from many journeys along stone roads. His posture was calm but firm, his presence drawing attention without effort. Some in the crowd looked at him with curiosity, others with reverence, and some with quiet skepticism. Then he began to describe a vision of the future. He spoke of a time when the Son of Man would come in glory, surrounded by heavenly beings, and all nations would be gathered before him. In this vision, humanity would be divided, like a shepherd separating sheep from goats. The image was familiar to those who lived among flocks and fields. Sheep, known for their gentle nature, would be placed on one side, and goats on the other. Yet the separation was not based on power or knowledge. It was based on something deeper. Jesus explained that the king would speak to those on his right side, welcoming them into a kingdom prepared since the beginning of the world. The reason would seem simple. They had fed the hungry. They had given water to the thirsty. They had welcomed strangers, clothed the poor, cared for the sick, and visited those imprisoned. The people listening might have expected praise for prayer or ritual. Instead, the measure of righteousness appeared in acts of mercy. In the story, those who were welcomed seemed surprised. They asked when they had seen the king hungry, thirsty, or alone. They could not remember a moment when they had served such a powerful figure. Yet the answer revealed the heart of the teaching. Whatever kindness they had shown to the least among them, the forgotten, the suffering, the unnoticed, they had done to him. Then the vision turned solemn. Those on the other side were confronted with the same standard. They had seen hunger but ignored it. They had passed the stranger without welcome. They had avoided the suffering of others. Their failure was not a crime of violence or rebellion, but something quieter, the absence of compassion. The crowd listening to Jesus would have felt the weight of these words. In their world, survival was often difficult. Resources were limited, and social divisions were strong. Yet the teaching suggested that every encounter carried meaning. A shared piece of bread, a cup of water offered on a hot day, a visit to someone forgotten by society. These small acts became signs of a heart aligned with the will of God. Some listeners may have felt encouraged, realizing that kindness held eternal value. Others may have felt uneasy, recognizing how often people overlook the suffering around them. The message did not depend on wealth or education. Anyone could choose mercy. Anyone could turn toward compassion. As the sun moved slowly across the sky, the crowd remained thoughtful. The parable was not simply about the end of time. It was about the present moment. It suggested that judgment was connected to everyday life, how people treated the vulnerable, how they responded to need, and whether they recognized the dignity of others. In the quiet after the story, the hills of Judea stood unchanged, the olive trees rustling softly in the wind. Yet the idea lingered among those who had heard it. The future described by Jesus seemed distant, but the choices that shaped it began in ordinary acts of kindness. And so the teaching remained, echoing beyond that gathering. A reminder that compassion, often unnoticed in the moment, may one day stand at the center of how a life is remembered.
My brothers and sisters, peace be with you. Open your hearts to the truth I bring. Blessed are those